What happened when an undercover CEO walked into his own restaurant and got treated like he didn't belong? Welcome, brilliant and kind-hearted viewers. You have a real talent for choosing the stories that matter. Today we dive into the powerful journey of Caleb Shore, a millionaire CEO who disguised himself as a broke customer to uncover the truth behind declining customer reviews. What he found wasn't just poor service, it was a broken culture. But instead of walking away, he rolled up his sleeves and decided to fix it from the floor up. This is one transformation you don't want to miss. Caleb Shore sat alone in his sleek, glass-walled office on the top floor of Shoreline Catch's corporate headquarters, a tablet in one hand and a growing knot in his stomach. On the screen were the latest customer satisfaction reports from his statewide chain of seafood restaurants. The numbers, sales margins, foot traffic, were all steady, but the comments, that was where the rot hid. Felt judged the moment I walked in. Hostess rolled her eyes when I asked about the lunch special. Manager told me this isn't a soup kitchen. Caleb sighed, setting the tablet down and rubbing his temples. He hadn't built the company from scratch. His parents had opened the first Shoreline Catch 30 years ago, a humble crab shack with paper menus and plastic baskets. But after their passing, he'd taken the reins and grown the brand into a polished chain of 14 locations known for their grilled salmon, nautical charm, and hospitality-first motto. Somewhere along the way, though, the charm had thinned. Caleb leaned back in his chair, remembering his father's words. A full plate means nothing if a guest walks away empty. Lately, it seemed too many guests were doing just that. He'd relied on district managers to handle hiring, culture, and day-to-day oversight, trusting that the mission would trickle down. But the tone in those customer reviews was clear. The heart had gone missing. His assistant Nora had flagged the reports, gently suggesting a few new training sessions and maybe some sensitivity workshops. But Caleb couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't a surface problem. It was deeper, cultural, systemic. "I'm tired of reading about it," he muttered to himself. "I need to feel it." That night, Caleb called an old friend from his college theater days who now worked in special effects makeup. "I need to look like I just crawled off a shrimp boat with nothing but lint and debt in my pockets," he said. 2 days later, with a scruffy beard glued to his jaw, sun-damaged clothes from a thrift store, and a backpack slung over one shoulder, the owner of one of the state's most popular seafood restaurant chains stepped onto the cracked sidewalk in front of Shoreline Catch 3, completely unrecognizable, and completely determined to find the truth. The air smelled of salt and fryer grease as Caleb Shore stepped onto the sidewalk outside Shoreline Catch 3, dressed in the kind of outfit that earned side glances instead of handshakes. His patched-up windbreaker hung loosely over a faded t-shirt, and his jeans, scuffed at the knees, dragged slightly at the cuffs. The fake beard itched beneath his chin, but it did its job. He looked like someone down on his luck, maybe fresh off the docks or drifting from job to job. This location had been one of the originals his parents had opened it near the harbor 2 decades ago. It had charm, history, and had once boasted lines out the door. But now, as Caleb stepped through the doors, all he saw was polished wood, stage decor, and employees too preoccupied to notice a guest entering. He waited awkwardly by the host stand, shifting his weight, trying to look like a regular walk-in. After a minute, a tall man in a tight shirt and perfectly slicked back hair strutted up, chewing gum like it owed him rent. "You need something, man?" the host asked, already half smirking. "Just hoping to grab lunch," Caleb replied, voice low and casual. The man gave him a once-over and laughed. "Look, buddy, we're not exactly budget dining. Maybe try the food truck down the street?" A younger server nearby chuckled under his breath. The host turned back toward the kitchen, muttering loud enough for Caleb to hear, "Place smells like bait now." Before Caleb could respond, a calm voice cut through the tension. "I've got it," said a young woman in a navy apron and khaki pants. She stepped forward with confidence, brushing past the sneering host. "Hi there, welcome to Shoreline Catch," she said warmly. "My name's Maya. Can I get you a booth or a table?" Caleb nodded gratefully. "Booth, please." As she led him to the back, Maya shot the host a look that could peel paint. She handed him a menu, her voice steady and professional. "We've got a few lunch specials today. Catch of the day's tilapia, served with steamed veggies and garlic rice. No pressure, take your time." Caleb studied her as much as he did the menu. Maya was composed, respectful, and didn't once treat him like he didn't belong. When she refilled his water without being asked and recommended the lowest priced dish without judgment, he knew he'd found someone who still understood what hospitality meant. What she didn't know was that this meal was going to change both of their lives. As Caleb sipped the lemon water Maya had brought over, he kept his head down, but his ears open. The dining area was only half full, yet the staff moved like they were clocking hours, not delivering service. Maya remained attentive, checking in just the right amount, explaining the dish's ingredients with care, and never once letting her tone drop, even when another table snapped fingers for ketchup. Caleb admired her poise, but he also noticed something else: the subtle isolation. No one seemed to help her. While she juggled 3 tables, Trent, the arrogant host, leaned against the wall, scrolling on his phone, chuckling at memes with another server. Then Caleb heard the manager's voice, low but clear, coming from the kitchen pass window. "Let the girl handle it, she's good with the strays," Roddy, the restaurant manager, was saying to Trent. Caleb froze, pretending to read the menu as he listened. "Guy like that walks in, you smile, nod, and hope he doesn't ask for the good fish," Roddy added. Trent laughed, muttering, "He's probably here for the free water and the heat." Roddy replied, "Whatever, just keep the place looking clean. We don't need another Yelp review from someone who smells like seaweed and bad credit." Caleb's jaw tightened, but he kept his cool. This wasn't just a rude employee, it was a manager, validating open mockery of customers who didn't look the part. It wasn't an isolated incident, this was cultural rot. And it was happening in his father's old location. Across the room, Maya had just dropped off a plate of food at another table, still smiling, still calm, while the rest of the team remained indifferent to the growing line at the front. When Maya returned with Caleb's grilled tilapia, she asked with a warm tone, "Would you like hot sauce or lemon on the side?" He shook his head, quietly studying her. "Thanks, this looks great." She offered a quick nod and turned to clean up a cluttered table that wasn't even hers. Caleb glanced toward the kitchen again and caught Roddy smirking at Trent, as if they were sharing a joke no one else could hear. Caleb had seen enough for one day, but he wasn't angry because he'd been insulted. He was furious because it confirmed what the reports had hinted at. Guests were being sized up, judged, and tossed aside, and no one in charge seemed to care. Except maybe for Maya. The next morning, Caleb Shore left his penthouse loft for a rundown motel off the highway. That's where he would change into the second version of himself. This time a weathered trucker with sun-creased skin, a limp from an old knee injury, and a denim jacket 2 sizes too big. He stepped into Shoreline Catch 7, a roadside branch just off I-87, and walked in with a quiet nod to the hostess. She barely glanced up. "We're full," she said, though half the tables were empty. When he politely asked about takeout, she sighed and tossed a menu onto the counter, muttering something under her breath as she walked away. A young man in the kitchen called out, "We doing charity now?" And laughter followed. Caleb took the menu and walked out without a word. Over the next 3 days, he visited 4 more locations, each time under a new identity. In the beachside restaurant at Store 4, he posed as a single dad with 2 noisy kids and a worn-out credit card. They were seated near the bathroom, and the server acted as though refilling water was a personal insult. He watched her roll her eyes when his youngest spilled lemonade, then try to charge for napkins. At Store 10, a grungy location near the docks, he wore a windbreaker with a broken zipper and asked to apply for part-time work. The manager, without looking up, told him, "We're not hiring for a dish pit right now. Come back when you can string a sentence together." The irony stung. In Store 2, he pretended to be a retired fisherman asking about their senior specials. The hostess looked him up and down before snapping, "The menu's the same for everyone. You're not getting a discount just for being old." She waved him off like a nuisance. And at Store 6, a sleeker, newer location near the upscale marina, he wore a collared shirt and khakis, still modest but less ragged. There, he asked about gluten-free options and was handed a greasy, torn paper menu. When he asked a second question about shellfish allergies, the waiter leaned in and whispered, "Look, pal, if you've got that many problems, maybe stick to fast food. We're not a hospital." With each visit, Caleb took mental notes, not just of the staff's behavior, but of the indifference in the air. He wasn't seeing a bad apple here or there. This was a culture problem, a rot spreading quietly under polished surfaces and Instagrammable plates. And while some employees showed kindness, one server helped an elderly couple find seating during a rush, another quietly gave a kid an extra bread roll. It was rare and almost always came from junior staff. What he didn't see was leadership. No one was guiding the floor with the values the brand once stood for. No one, except Maya. Her face kept flashing in his mind, a reminder of what the job was supposed to look like, and that made what came next an easy decision. It was the sixth restaurant that broke him. Shoreline Catch, 9, tucked in a bustling retail strip near the interstate, looked impressive from the outside. Clean windows, bright signage, a line of polished cars in the parking lot. Caleb entered dressed as a laid-off dock worker. Calloused hands, oil-stained jeans, and a flannel shirt missing 2 buttons. He walked in around noon, hoping for a quiet lunch and a glimpse into how staff treated someone who didn't scream, "Big tip!" At the host stand, a woman in her mid-30s wearing too much perfume and too little patience barely glanced at him before saying, "We're full." Caleb looked past her. Several tables were open. "I don't mind waiting," he said calmly. She scoffed. "Sir, we have a dress code for a reason. We're not a truck stop." A young busboy nearby looked up from wiping menus, clearly uncomfortable. Caleb asked to speak with a manager, to which the woman replied, "You're speaking to her." He stood still for a moment, letting the insults settle not just on himself, but on the legacy of what this brand had once been. He turned and walked out without another word, but inside something snapped. The pattern wasn't anecdotal anymore, it was embedded. It wasn't just staff turning people away based on how they looked. It was management reinforcing it. Worse, no one seemed surprised or bothered. It was as if empathy had been officially taken off the menu. That night, Caleb returned to Store 3, where it had all started, with Maya, with Trent, and with the smug manager Roddy, who called poor guests strays. This time there was no hoodie, no fake beard. Caleb wore a charcoal blazer, clean shoes, and walked in just after closing. The few remaining staff looked up in confusion as he passed through the front, not stopping until he reached Roddy's office at the back. The door was ajar, and Roddy was hunched over a laptop, typing in numbers from the day's receipts. When Caleb knocked once and stepped in, Roddy barely looked up. "We're closed." "Not for me," Caleb replied calmly. Roddy blinked, confused. "Can I help you?" "You're Roddy, right?" "Yeah, and you are?" Caleb, "Sure." Roddy's mouth opened, then closed. His face went pale. Caleb sat down, voice firm. "I own this restaurant, and 13 others. And I came in here dressed like a customer you decided wasn't worth serving. That ends tonight." And just like that, the cleanup began. Roddy sat frozen in his chair, the color draining from his face as Caleb's words settled over the room like a storm front. I didn't know," he stammered, voice thin and brittle. "Exactly," Caleb said coldly. "You didn't know, you didn't ask, you didn't care." Before Roddy could gather himself, a knock came at the office door. Trent, the arrogant host who'd mocked Caleb days earlier, peeked in. "Hey boss, the drawers counted." He stopped short when he saw Caleb, now seated like a CEO, not some stranger in threadbare clothes. "You," Trent whispered, eyes wide. Caleb stood, walked to the door and pointed directly at him. "You're done, both of you. Clear out your desks." Trent blustered, "Wait a minute. I didn't—" "You had your chance," Caleb cut in. "You treated someone like garbage based on how they looked. That tells me everything I need to know." Roddy remained silent, sweat beating at his temple as he began logging out of the POS system. It was a quiet fall from grace. With both men packing up in stunned silence, Caleb turned and called for Maya. She entered cautiously, apron still on, confusion plain on her face. "Yes, sir?" Caleb gave a faint smile, extending his hand. "Thank you," he said. "You're the reason I didn't shut this place down entirely." Her brows furrowed. "I don't understand." "I was here 3 days ago," he said. "You treated me with respect when you had no idea who I was. That spoke louder than any quarterly report ever could." He gestured to the now empty manager's desk. "I want you to run this location, effective immediately. You'll have support from a regional director for the first month. After that, it's yours." Maya's eyes widened. "But I've never managed a team before." Caleb gave a quiet nod. You've led one, you just weren't given the title. She stood speechless for a beat, then nodded slowly, as if the weight of his words was still sinking in. Before leaving, Caleb removed one of the dusty stock photos hanging on the office wall, a smiling family in a booth from a long-forgotten ad campaign. He handed it to Maya. Start fresh. Replace these with real people, real stories. Make it something worth walking into. As he walked out into the now empty dining room, fluorescent lights flickering above, there was no applause, no grand send-off. Just the hum of the soda machine and the quiet echo of chairs being stacked. But for Caleb, it was the sound of change finally beginning. 2 days later, Caleb stood before a folding table in the dim warehouse behind Shoreline Catch's corporate office. No catered lunch, no slick PowerPoint slides, just 12 regional managers, some with clipboards, others with skepticism in their eyes, seated on mismatched chairs pulled from break rooms. Caleb didn't waste time. You've all seen the numbers, sales are steady, but what those spreadsheets don't show is how many customers walk in feeling invisible and walk out never coming back. A few heads lowered. One man cleared his throat, about to speak, but Caleb raised a hand. I've seen it myself. I walked into your restaurant dressed like someone who couldn't afford the tip jar, and I was mocked, ignored, even turned away. In places with my name on the wall, murmurs rippled across the room. Some managers shifted uncomfortably. Caleb pressed on. This company was built on hospitality. Not just seafood, not just profits, but treating people like they matter. Somewhere along the way, we lost that. He opened a binder and began flipping through pages. Starting today, we're changing how this company works, top to bottom. He outlined 3 major initiatives. First, promotions would no longer be based on tenure alone, but on behavior, leadership, and feedback from both staff and customers. Second, a mentorship program would launch immediately, led by employees known for integrity, not just performance. And third, secret diners would visit each store every month, not to critique food, but to evaluate kindness, respect, and transparency. One manager, arms crossed, asked bluntly, "What about our sales targets?" "They're staying," Caleb replied, "but so is accountability. I'd rather lose a few short-term wins than keep one dishonest manager who treats people like trash." Another manager, older and weary-eyed, nodded slowly. "What if someone resists these changes?" "Then they don't belong here," Caleb said simply. There were no applause breaks, no standing ovations, just silence, then note-taking. For the first time in years, the company wasn't just chasing numbers, it was chasing its soul. Caleb stepped back, letting the weight of the message settle. The rebuilding had started, not with a new logo or menu, but with values written not on walls but in actions. And for the first time, he saw real leadership spark in that room, not from him, but from those finally waking up to what leadership meant. Back at Store 3, Maya Lin wasted no time stepping into her new role, not with grand speeches or sweeping orders, but with small, meaningful shifts that made the team take notice. Within a week, she'd rearranged the front host station to remove the physical barrier that once made guests feel boxed in. She implemented a rotating lunch break schedule so servers didn't get burned out from double shifts, and started a simple initiative, a second check form where any customer who didn't order a full meal received a quick follow-up from a manager before they left, not to upsell, but to listen. Her focus wasn't on control, it was on care. And slowly, the staff responded. One by one, employees who had once coasted started asking questions, offering help, staying a few minutes late to wipe down booths without being asked. Some pushed back. A senior waiter muttered that Maya was trying too hard and playing favorites, but she handled it with quiet grace, reminding the team in their first staff huddle, "We're not here to serve food, we're here to serve people. That includes each other." Caleb visited unannounced one Thursday evening, slipping into the dining room as the dinner crowd thinned. The place felt different, warmer, more focused. The tension he'd once walked into was gone. He found Maya at the front, sorting through callback notes for customers who had test-dined the new seasonal menu. She glanced up, offered a half-smile. "Here to audit me again?" she joked. Caleb chuckled. "Not this time." As they stood in the soft hum of the quieting restaurant, Maya gestured around the space. "They're starting to believe it's okay to care again," she said, "even the ones who rolled their eyes at first." Caleb nodded, watching a server politely offer to help a coworker refill waters before clocking out. Change hadn't come from policy or pressure. It had come from modeling the right behavior. And in Maya, he'd found the kind of leader who didn't need authority to lead, just permission. Now she had both. As the cultural shift gained momentum, Caleb turned his focus to the people being brought into the company. For years, hiring had been handled entirely by regional managers, who often prioritized sales stats and fast-talking charisma over character. That changed. Caleb didn't micromanage, but he personally reviewed every hiring packet for new front-of-house and kitchen staff across all locations. He wasn't just looking for qualifications, he was looking for signs of empathy, patience, and integrity. At Store 5, he greenlit the hire of a former food truck owner who had no chain restaurant experience but had built a loyal customer base by remembering names and dietary quirks. At Store 8, he approved a quiet, detail-oriented dishwasher named Eli Wynn for a new position, back-of-house mentor, a role created to train kitchen staff not just on prep, but on teamwork and ethics. Eli had once corrected a cook who tried to reuse fish from a failed order. "If we wouldn't serve it to our moms, we don't serve it to our guests," he'd said, words that made it into Caleb's notebook that night. Another hire was a former credit union employee with zero restaurant experience but a reputation for calming angry customers and helping them navigate tough financial decisions with dignity. She was brought in not to sell but to serve as a hospitality advocate, a weekend-only role Caleb piloted that involved walking the floor, answering questions, and making guests feel seen, not sold to. Some of the old guard pushed back, skeptical of hiring people without restaurant hustle. But Caleb made it clear, hustle without heart wouldn't cut it anymore. The future of Shoreline Catch would be built on character first, then skill. And slowly, a new tone began to settle across the chain. Customers weren't just being greeted, they were being welcomed. Team members weren't just being trained, they were being mentored. And for the first time in a long while, Caleb felt proud of the people walking in under his name, because they were the kind of people who would made his parents proud too. 3 months later, the numbers told one story, but the atmosphere told another, one that couldn't be captured in a spreadsheet. Revenue had nudged upward, margins held steady, but the real win came from something harder to measure: trust. Return visits were up by 22%, and for the first time in years, guests were sending thank you notes through the website, not to complain, but to praise. One letter came from a retired teacher who had felt seen and respected by a young server who walked her through the entire menu without rushing. Another, from a single mother who said a hospitality advocate helped calm her anxious son and made them feel like guests, not problems. Caleb didn't let these get buried in a data folder. He kept the handwritten ones in his desk drawer, exactly as they arrived. "Don't digitize them," he told Nora. "I want to remember how this felt." Back at Store 3, Maya had not only settled into her role, she'd transformed it. Her staff now held weekly peer feedback sessions. She rotated roles so no one got stuck doing the same task day after day, and she even started inviting feedback from first-time customers with a simple form titled, "Did we make you feel welcome?" Caleb visited late one evening, just as the dinner rush died down. He stood in the doorway watching Maya laugh with a family as she handed out to-go bags. She caught sight of him and smiled. "You checking up on me again?" she teased. "Not this time," Caleb said. "Just making sure we don't forget how this started." Outside, the lot shimmered under the halogen lights. Rows of parked cars, now symbols of more than just business. They were signs that people had chosen to return, to trust again. Caleb stood for a moment, hands in his pockets, breathing in the scent of brine and fried shrimp that drifted from the kitchen vent. He wasn't just rebuilding a company, he was restoring a legacy, not with slogans, but with action. Not from the top floor, but from the floor where it all began. And this time, he wasn't watching from behind the glass, he was walking beside the people who made it matter. The culture had shifted, the mission was clear. And it was only the beginning. The story of Caleb Shore's undercover journey reveals a powerful lesson. True leadership means staying connected to the human heartbeat of your organization. Despite strong financials, Caleb recognized that a business cannot thrive if it treats people, customers, or employees as disposable. By stepping down from the top floor and walking through his own restaurants in disguise, he uncovered the toxic behaviors and complacency hidden beneath polished surfaces. But more importantly, he discovered the quiet strength of people like Maya and Eli, whose integrity held the potential to reshape the entire culture. The lesson is clear. Systems and structures matter, but people matter more. Respect, empathy, and dignity should never be optional in service-based industries. Titles don't define leaders, actions do. Caleb's choice to promote based on values, not tenure, and to hire for character rather than charisma proved that meaningful change begins not with policies, but with purpose. When leaders listen, observe, and act with humility, they empower others to rise. And when a company chooses compassion over convenience, it doesn't just earn profits, it earns loyalty, trust, and legacy. In the end, Shoreline Catch wasn't saved by strategy, but by heart. And that's a lesson every leader should carry.